The eugenics movement is aimed toward improving the genetic composition of the human race. The word eugenics came from the Greek word eu, meaning well, and genos, meaning offspring, together meaning well-born. On May 16, 1883, Francis Galton, a respected British scholar and Charles Darwin's cousin, coined the term eugenics, which was later described as using our understanding of the laws of heredity to improve the stock of the human race. Galton believed that the human race could help their own future by selective breeding individuals with desired traits. In Britain, the idea of improving the human race through selective breeding never became popular, but eventually took a turn for the worse in other countries. In the late 19th century, the eugenics movement began in the United States. Unlike in Britain, the eugenics supporters in the U.S. were focused on stopping the transfer of undesirable traits to future generations. The first Eugenics Records Office, or ERO, was established in Cold Spring Harbor, New York in 1911, which was a result of research that was funded by a group of U.S. leaders, citizens, and corporations. By the late 1920s, about half of the states in the U.S. passed enforced sterilization laws that affected poor Black people or people with learning disabilities. One of the most widespread sterilization law ever framed was in Nazi Germany on July 14, 1933. Hitler's first victims of his examination policies were disabled children under the age of 3, which were killed by lethal injection or excessive doses of medication. It went from children under the age of 3 to the killing of teens and adults for certain defects. The eugenics movement in the U.S. slowly became less popular and lost credibility when Hitler was using eugenic principles to justify the massacres. Early eugenicists appealed to the idea of self-sacrifice, encouraging those that are healthy to marry and reproduce abundantly. The new eugenics claims the virtue of relieving suffering, respecting private choice, and expressing compassion. Modern technologies are often referred to as gene therapy technologies, or testing rather than eugenics. Gene therapy was traditionally intended to detect embryos with rare and severe genetic disorders, such as Huntington's chorea. As technology becomes more powerful and cheaper, its range of application will widen. One of the complications of genetic testing when eradicating disease is that a particular ethnic group will be involved due to shared ancestry. For example, sickle cell disease is more prevalent among those of African or Mediterranean ancestry. Ridding our society of sickle cell disease would require a screening of all in the affected population, including excessive testing to one specific group of people. This could easily be translated as racism. The use of genetic testing has the potential to reinforce stereotypes on a racial basis. The biggest difference between modern genetic technologies and historical eugenics uses is consent. People today practice genetic testing by choice, and individuals cannot be forced into testing or required to take action, like sterilizations. But at what point will these now choices turn into future requirements and standards in medical science?
I think as an example, vaccination. And I think it's entirely appropriate to impose that kind of medical treatment on populations and just require that parents vaccinate their children, both because it's better for those children and because it's a decision that we're making about the welfare of the larger population. And so there are circumstances where I can reconcile myself to having kind of particular kinds of medical care imposed upon people.
There are many differing views on genetic testing in relation to possible eugenic motives. Some believe that the altering of genetics is playing God, and that we should leave things the way that they were intended to be. Others believe that if there is any possibility to end diseases, we should adapt to those ideas as a society.
I'm not too worried about the playing God thing. If there's a sort of like a way that we can re-engineer a person's genetics to diminish the likelihood that they're going to experience a kind of like a hardship that we can avoid, then I'm in favor of that. I don't believe that everything happens for a reason. I don't believe that God creates people with particular traits because that's what his will was for them in some specific way. And so I think that when a person kind of like is born with a sort of unique set of traits, that reflects not God's will in any specific way, but instead that reflect the sort of random processes of nature and the choices that we have made as individuals, and the sort of environmental kind of consequences of the way we organize a society. And so I don't buy the idea that like God has willed someone to have a particular trait, and that any kind of like attempt to intervene in that is a sort of like playing God, any more than I think that treating a person who has cancer and trying to prolong their life would be playing God, or treating them with a common cold would be playing God. But I think that those are, but basically what we're trying to do is understand what human health looks like and make choices about how we can help people like live well. Generally, I think that the idea that we ought to kind of like hold back from an area because because we think it's playing God is not a helpful kind of like way to process those choices.
Another issue needing to be addressed is how and who will determine what traits are undesirable. This becomes a moral issue of simply balancing well-being before the technology creates a superhuman. There is a great possibility that the technologies available will be abused and people will begin using it strictly for cosmetic, power, or other selfish reasoning.
As a society, as a culture, we have to engage in like the hard discussions about what sort of things are we going to permit, what things are we going to require, and we've got to do our best to kind of like we've got to do our best.
Yeah. In any realm of new science or discovery, discussion is only the first step that must take place. Many moral, ethical, and natural questions must be asked. How would we, as a society, inform people that they are a defect? Will eugenics create a superior human? Are we ready for the power that will come with this technology? Will it harm more than it will help in the future? Are we going against what God wants for us? These are just a few of the questions that should be asked before deciding what you believe is right.